the hospital lobby was unusually quiet that rainy afternoon. The soft hum of vending machines and the rhythmic squeak of nurses' shoes across the polished floor echoed in the silence. Ethan Cole, the powerful CEO of a multinational empire, sat motionless on the cold leather couch. His eyes, red and hollow, stared at the marble floor as though searching for answers in the cracks between the tiles. Just hours earlier, the doctor had spoken the words no parent ever wanted to hear. His little boy, Noah, barely 6 years old, had lost the fight against a rare heart condition. The memory of his child's frail hands slipping away from his own still throbbed in his chest like an open wound. Ethan was a man known to conquer boardrooms, outsmart competitors, and bend markets to his will. But at that moment, he was nothing more than a broken father, stripped of power, stripped of purpose. As he lowered his face into his palms, a small, trembling voice cut through the heavy silence. "Sir, are you my new daddy?" The words startled him. Slowly, he raised his head and saw her. A little girl, no older than 7, stood in front of him, her tiny frame swallowed by an oversized hospital gown. She clutched a threadbare teddy bear missing one button eye. Her hair was messy, her cheeks pale, and yet her eyes, wide and searching, held a fragile hope. For a moment, Ethan was speechless. The question sliced through him, sharp and unexpected. He almost thought he had imagined it, but the girl looked up at him with utter seriousness. "Are you talking to me?" he whispered, his voice rough from hours of suppressed grief. The girl nodded timidly. "The nurse said my mommy went to sleep. And I don't have a daddy. She told me maybe someone would come, and I thought maybe you came for me." Her lips quivered, but she tried to smile. Ethan's throat tightened. His instincts screamed to look away, to walk out, to shield himself from more pain. He had just lost his own child, how could he even breathe in the presence of another? Yet something in her innocent gaze anchored him. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Lily," she replied, hugging the teddy bear tighter. He swallowed hard. "Lily, where's your mommy?" "She's inside the room," Lily whispered, pointing down the hall. "But she doesn't wake up. The nurse said she's very sick." Ethan felt his chest ache. He had seen this scene before: families waiting, lives hanging by a thread in sterile hospital rooms. But this time, it wasn't business associates or employees. It was a little girl left alone in a world too cruel for her tiny shoulders. Something stirred in him. An echo of Noah's laughter, the way his son used to tug on his sleeve and ask impossible questions. "Why do stars twinkle, Daddy? Why do people get sick?" Now here was Lily, different child, different story, but the same raw need for comfort, protection, belonging. Ethan leaned forward slowly, his powerful frame shrinking into gentleness. "Lily, I'm not your daddy," he said carefully. "But I can sit with you for a while, if you'd like." Her eyes brightened instantly, as though his words were enough to keep the storm away. She slid onto the couch beside him, small legs dangling without reaching the floor. For the first time since the doctor's devastating words, Ethan felt warmth in his chest. Fragile, trembling, but real. Over the next hour, Lily told him about her life in the simplest words. How her mother, Grace, worked 2 jobs but still made time to read bedtime stories. How they lived in a small apartment, sometimes skipping meals, but always laughing together. How Lily dreamed of having a daddy like the one she saw in cartoons, someone who would protect her and never let her be scared. Ethan listened quietly, his heart twisting at every word. He thought of Noah, of the promises he could never fulfill, of the bedtime stories he would never get to finish. Yet sitting beside Lily, he felt his broken pieces shift, painful, but moving towards something new. When the nurse came by to check on Lily, she gave Ethan a surprised glance. He wasn't just anyone, he was the Ethan Cole, the untouchable tycoon. People usually whispered his name with awe or fear, not with the softness Lily carried. But here he was, holding her teddy bear carefully while she adjusted her gown, as though he had always belonged there. That night, Ethan made a choice he couldn't quite explain. He stayed. He told himself it was temporary, that Lily just needed company until Grace woke up. But deep inside, he knew it was more. Days turned into weeks. Grace remained unconscious in intensive care after a severe stroke. The doctors were unsure if she would recover fully. With no relatives stepping forward, Lily was left adrift in the system. Foster care loomed over her fragile world. But Ethan wouldn't allow it. He found himself visiting every day, sitting by Lily's side, reading her stories, even bringing her small gifts. The staff began to whisper, wondering why a man of his stature would spend hours in the pediatric wing instead of his corporate office. The truth was simple: in Lily's laughter, Ethan heard echoes of his son. In her questions, he found reasons to speak again. And in her trust, he found a fragile chance at redemption. Yet not everything was easy. The challenges mounted. The board of his company grew restless, accusing him of neglecting responsibilities. The media caught wind of his hospital visits, spinning rumors about scandals and secret families. And most painfully, Ethan faced his own guilt. Was he replacing Noah with Lily? Was he betraying his son's memory by letting this little girl into his heart? The storm inside him was fierce. But every time he thought of pulling away, Lily would look up at him with those trusting eyes and ask softly, "You'll be here tomorrow, right?" And he couldn't say no. One evening, after a particularly brutal meeting with his board, Ethan returned to the hospital. Lily was waiting in the lobby, swinging her feet on the couch. The moment she saw him, her face lit up. "Sir," she squealed, running to him. "I knew you'd come back." Something inside Ethan broke and healed all at once. He crouched, catching her in his arms. His powerful hands, once meant for signing billion-dollar deals, now held a fragile child who needed him more than any corporation ever could. "Lily," he whispered, tears burning his eyes. "I'm not your daddy, but if you'll let me, I'll be here. Always." The little girl hugged him tightly, her tiny arms wrapped around his neck. "Then you are my daddy," she whispered. And for the first time since Noah's death, Ethan allowed himself to believe it might be true. Part 2. The days blurred into one another, yet Ethan found himself anchored to a new rhythm, one that had nothing to do with boardrooms or profit margins. Every morning he stopped by the hospital before heading to his office, and every evening he returned, carrying small surprises for Lily: a coloring book, a pack of crayons, sometimes just her favorite cookies. The girl's smile became his medicine. The quiet hospital halls that had once suffocated him with grief now held flickers of laughter whenever Lily skipped down the corridors with him. He began to feel alive again, though guilt still clung to him like a shadow. But reality soon demanded answers. One late afternoon, as Ethan helped Lily finish her homework in the lobby, a social worker approached. Her name was Ms. Harris, a middle-aged woman with kind but weary eyes. She looked at Ethan with a mixture of respect and suspicion. "Mr. Cole," she began gently, "I need to discuss Lily's situation." Lily clutched his sleeve immediately, her eyes wide. "Don't take me away," she whispered urgently, her tiny fingers digging into his arm. Ethan bent down, brushing a tear from her cheek. "It's okay, Lily. Let's hear what she has to say." Miss Harris explained that since Grace remained in a coma with an uncertain prognosis, Lily would have to be placed in temporary foster care. There were no relatives available to take her in. The words felt like a knife twisting in Ethan's chest. Foster care meant strangers, instability, fear, all the things Lily dreaded most. "No," Lily sobbed, hiding her face in Ethan's coat. "I don't want to go. You said you'd be here." Ethan's jaw tightened. For years he had built empires, crushed competitors, and commanded respect with a single word. But now, holding a trembling child in his arms, he felt powerless. Still, he straightened his back and looked the social worker in the eye. His voice was firm, almost cold, but his heart thundered. "She stays with me." Ms. Harris blinked, taken aback. "Mr. Cole, that's highly irregular. You're not her guardian, and the legal process." "Then start it," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "I'll do whatever it takes. Hire lawyers, fill out forms, go to court. But she's not going into foster care. Not while I'm alive." Lily peeked up at him, her tears slowing as hope flickered in her eyes. For the first time, Ethan realized he wasn't just comforting her anymore, he was fighting for her. The battle that followed was fierce. His board members grew restless, accusing him of losing focus on the company. "We hired you to lead an empire, not babysit some girl," one of them sneered in a private meeting. The media caught fire, running headlines like "CEO obsessed with orphan girl's secret past" or "Coal empire in jeopardy as CEO neglects duties." Even some of his closest advisors urged him to step back. "Ethan, you've just lost a son. This isn't healthy. You're trying to replace him." Those words cut deepest of all. Late at night, he would sit in his penthouse apartment, staring at Noah's photos, wondering if they were right. Was he betraying his child's memory by letting Lily into his heart? But then he would remember the way Lily clung to him, the way she whispered, "You'll be here tomorrow, right?" And he knew this wasn't about replacing Noah. This was about saving Lily. And maybe, in doing so, saving himself too. Weeks later, the custody hearing arrived. The sterile courtroom was filled with hushed whispers. Lily sat beside Ethan, holding his hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. The judge looked down at Ethan with skepticism. "Mr. Cole, you're a CEO with vast responsibilities. Do you truly believe you can provide the stability and care this child needs?" Ethan rose slowly. He wasn't a man given to emotional speeches, but today, his words came from the rawest part of his soul. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, "I lost my son not long ago. And in that loss, I thought my life was over. But then I met Lily. She didn't just need someone, I realized I needed her too. Not to replace my child, but to honor him. Because love doesn't run out. It multiplies." He glanced at Lily, whose tear-streaked face turned up toward him with trust. "This little girl deserves a home, not a system. She deserves someone who will fight for her. And I swear to you, I will. I may run a company, but I've never fought for anything the way I will fight for her." The courtroom was silent. Even the judge's stern expression softened slightly. After a tense deliberation, the gavel finally came down. "Custody granted to Mr. Ethan Cole, pending Grace's medical outcome." Lily squealed, hugging Ethan tightly. "I knew it. I knew you were my daddy now." For the first time in months, Ethan laughed, a real, unguarded laugh that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But the story didn't end there. Months later, Grace slowly began to recover. Her speech was slurred, her movements weak, but when she finally opened her eyes fully, the first thing she asked for was Lily. Ethan faced one of the hardest moments of his life. He knew Lily belonged with her mother. And yet the thought of letting her go tore at him. When Grace saw her daughter safe and smiling, she wept. Then her eyes met Ethan's, filled with confusion. "You stayed with her?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "I couldn't let her go through this alone." Tears streamed down Grace's cheeks. She took his hand with trembling fingers. Thank you for being there when I couldn't." The coming weeks were a balancing act. Grace needed therapy, support, and time to rebuild her strength. Ethan offered resources, care, even a home where Grace and Lily could stay until she was strong enough to live independently. At first, Grace resisted, pride and uncertainty making her hesitate. But one night, she overheard Lily whispering to Ethan, "I prayed for a daddy, and God sent me you." Grace broke down, realizing fate had given her daughter not just a protector, but a father figure she never expected. Years later, their story became one whispered about with awe. The ruthless CEO who had once lived only for power had transformed into a man who fought for love, family, and second chances. Lily grew up secure and cherished, her laughter filling the home Ethan once thought would stay silent forever. Grace regained her strength, eventually finding her place not just as Lily's mother, but as a partner in building a new family together. And Ethan? He never stopped missing Noah. But he carried his son's memory like a torch, lighting the way forward. By opening his heart to Lily, he honored his boy's life by choosing love over despair. One quiet evening, years later, Lily, now taller, braver, but still holding her old teddy bear, looked at him with the same wide eyes she had the first day. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you think Noah knows about me?" Ethan's throat tightened, but he smiled gently. "Yes, sweetheart. I believe he does." And I think he's smiling, because he knows you saved me. Lily hugged him, and in that moment, Ethan realized the truth. Sometimes family isn't just about blood. Sometimes it's about broken souls finding each other, healing together, and proving that love, against all odds, can rewrite destiny.